Welcome, audience, to another edition of Overcome Out Loud with Charlie Smith. I'm so grateful to have you join us. This is a podcast that I have dedicated to sharing stories of others that have overcome adversity in their lives to give people hope. So many suffer in silence still today with worry, doubt, fear, insecurity, depression, anxiety, that I feel compelled to use the stories of my own overcoming and others to give you hope. And today, on this episode, I'm really excited to have back from our COVID kind of Zoom days, Aly B in studio. Hi, Aly.
Hi, Charlie.
Welcome to the Overcome Out Loud studio, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I feel so grateful to be here.
Well, Aly is an amazing friend. I've actually been invited to speak when she was teaching at some of her classes about my journey through substance abuse. Aly is a health and fitness and mindset coach. She's an incredible single mother of two, a professional woman. I call her M Cube. She is helping moms train their muscles and their mindset. Really detailed and extensive background in certified athletic training, and has introduced me at actually some talks that I've given. And so here today to share her overcome story. And you're an inspiration. And thank you again for joining us. I'm looking forward to hearing your story today.
Thank you. I feel so happy to be here, and that is what I want to inspire others as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that people have gotten, I think all of our regular listeners are at some point in their life struggling with something. And so even just, today I was on the phone with a young man who just said, have you ever been depressed? He just wanted to know that somebody had experienced what he was experiencing because he felt so unique and he felt so alone that just that shared experience of, oh, okay, you've been depressed and how did you walk through that?
Yes.
So it's powerful what we do. And so tell us a little bit about your upbringing. I know especially for you, and I think what's going to be important, especially for the young women in the audience, we've had some amazing, powerful and inspirationally vulnerable and courageous women on. It's really important, especially those adolescent years. But tell us a little bit about how you grew up.
Okay, so yeah, they say it takes a village, right,
Yeah.
to raise a child, and it's like, what if you don't have a village? And I didn't have that village. Is like my mom actually, and this is a big part of why I do what I do with moms taking care of themselves, because my mom didn't take care of herself. She was taking care of everybody else. And it's a very long story, but basically when I was 3 years old, she had what you would call a nervous breakdown. And, again, that long story short is it turned into, and here's this woman who's taking care of herself and should have, I actually wrote a book about this, is like if she was a celebrity, maybe she would have gone to a place to rest, and all she needed was nutrition and support, and she got put into a hospital for the criminally insane, and she from then on was in and out of hospitals my entire life with mental illness. So I grew up with a mom who had mental illness, and then my father got sick with cancer when I was 11, and he died when I was 13. And I had one brother who was developmentally disabled and had his own special needs. So I basically grew up feeling like I had no place in the world, that I didn't belong. And, we grew up with basically the crazy house. So my house, when my mom would get sick, we would call it sick,
Right.
the ambulance, the police cars, the fire trucks, she would come to school and when she would get sick and get taken away in a straitjacket. So it was like, it's really interesting for me now with all the talk with mental health now. And this is going back 4 or 5 decades for me. It's always been part of my life. So I feel like, I grew up with so much shame and stigma that my mom was like my secret, that you don't want to talk about these things. So like when you talk about this boy who's calling you and wanting to just, you understand what I'm going through? Yes. And so I love that we're having more conversations about that, because when I grew up, it was just shame and stigma. And that's why I want to start sharing my story as well, so that people can understand.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, because, as a child, I think one of the most essential things we need is to feel safe, is to know that our primary caregivers, who bring us into this world, who are the only caregivers that we know at the time are there to take care of us. And when they're not, it leaves us unsettled. It leaves us, speaking from my own background of a different type of trauma experience. I think one of the things that I think people, Joel Lampagos, who was a guest on here, his mother suffered from postpartum depression and had a very bad episode of postpartum depression that left her very disconnected from him. And it was amazing for him to see that was his trauma. Like people think of trauma as these major experiences, whether it's violent abuse or sexual abuse, but trauma is not those things. Trauma can be a mother not available for her daughter and a father who, is the only one there to take care of her who's not available. And so how did young Aly, what coping skills did you learn to deal with what was becoming, you call it the crazy house, but for a child, it's an unsafe house. It's a house of dysregulation. It's a house of unpredictability. And that's what you experience. Is mom going to be home or is mom not going to be home? These are all things that rip apart the very security blanket, pun intended, that we need as children. And so I'm assuming that you learned some dishonesty, like not telling your secret was part of those coping skills. What other coping skills did you learn that people might relate to?
Yeah, so it's so true what you're saying about the unpredictability, because I still am challenged by that today with people and relationships because of that. Is very true. Is exactly that. There's no prediction that when is mommy going to get sick again? And I started to look for the signs of. I started to know when that's happening. And I started to I just would be waiting for it to happen as I started to grow up. And then, like you said, and then my dad gets sick. So it's the healthy parent who is there for me is now sick. So it was just always the unpredictability of what's going to happen, which I still work on today, of not trusting and just, not, are people going to be the way they are and that sort of thing. So for me, luckily, growing up where I grew up on Long Island, at the end, and what brought me to California is after my father had passed away and we moved here. But growing up on Long Island, and gratefully, my village was my friends and their families. So I had very close friends growing up, through elementary school, that I would stay with them when my mom got sick and my dad was sick, and that was my part of my village. So gratefully that I had these wonderful friends and their families. And then for me, I think I talk about when you don't have a village, and this is what I like to teach people, is you can create your village.
Yeah.
You can create your village. And there's a moment that I think I don't know if I told you about it or I started to tell you about it, where things just changed for me. Was do you remember, well, of course you remember, January 28th, I think it's 80, when the space shuttle blew up?
Of course.
So,
yeah, I was a sophomore at Fairfield in Connecticut. So I was actually right across from you on Long Island. We were right across from you on Long Island Sound.
Okay. So, that day I will never forget, my father had passed away. I think, this was the year prior. And my mom was sick, all the time. And my brother was not, he wasn't available. So I just, like I said, felt so alone. And how am I going to survive? And I didn't know how, it's just such a scary, lonely feeling to just not know how to navigate through life, enough as being a teenager alone, but just kind of figuring this all out. And I'll never forget that day changed my life. So my mom was sick at the time, and when she would get sick, she was paranoid. So she didn't want us going to school. And so and I knew by then, I was 14 years old, don't go to school because she'll just end up coming there and it'll be a whole scene. So I stayed home from school. We watched the space shuttle, and my mom was on the couch and she said, the space shuttle is going to blow up. And I thought she predicted it. It was so crazy. But now I know that's paranoia. You just expect the worst.
Right.
So, because then it blows up. So then that night, President Reagan gave a speech, and it's he saved my life. So I will never forget his speech. He said that the future is not for the faint-hearted. The future is for the brave. And we don't give up. And this is just, we keep going and we persevere. And I'm watching him it was my father speaking to me, maybe, or one of my coaches. So when you say what kept me coping, I was an athlete and I played sports. And that made me feel normal. Um, and that, I mean, it just was like this call to action. And I have never forgotten that happened. I've never forgotten those astronauts, because I feel like, in a way, they saved my life. They gave their life, and they'll never know it. And that's the thing, is like, we get to give the meaning to things in our life. We get to choose the meaning. And I gave it this meaning that I'm going to just do well in school and do well with my sports, and I'm going to just find a way to survive.
Wow. I mean, that's, there's the adage, right, that our beliefs, our thoughts drive our beliefs, and our beliefs generate our emotions, and our emotions generate our feelings, which drive our behaviors that generate results. And you had this shift in this event, and all of a sudden, your beliefs changed, and your view of the world is unsafe and scary, and that you couldn't cope, and I think we could all we all have a chance to be Aly's Ronald Reagan. We all have our chance to be somebody else's Ronald Reagan, or somebody's space shuttle astronaut. We may not know it at the time. And so what an incredible catalyst for you to find a sliver of hope. And I think when we talk about resilience, I think the research proves out that really the most resilient people in the world always had one person that believed in them. So you found these families that you created your own sense of safety, right? You had attached yourself now to sport to feel normal, and you had this inspiration from this talk that was deep-seated in you, and that propelled you from where you were into the next phase of your life. It's remarkable.
Yes, it just at least got me just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that's the thing, is just, and I think I started to realize, like, I can create my village. So I've always been that person, because I didn't have the role models, and there's just always been something inside me that's just been optimistic, even though I would get sad and disappointed, certainly, and ask the why me and all of that. But I would watch the inspirational movies, and I would just search for inspiration everywhere. And it's almost like you just create this village to go to, the quotes that keep you going, the music. Sports changes our state. It made me feel better being around my friends. So it's just like knowing anything, just grasping for anything to keep going until you just take that next step.
Let's pause on that for a second. I don't want to fast forward, but there's such a nugget. Such a huge nugget of gold right there. Because in contrast, your mother, let's use the term hunting for lack of a better term, the pessimist or paranoia of your mother's mental health allowed her to look and hunt for the negative. And sure enough, we know positive may or may not work, but we know negative always works negatively. And so when you look for the bad, you're always going to see the bad. You're going to, as you said, we give meaning to things. And so you found a different light, which was to hunt the good things, in the music, in the affirmational quotes, in the stories. And, for anybody who's listening, who's struggling, we do have that power now of choosing to hunt the good things or to hunt the bad things. But whichever you hunt, you will find. And I'm amazed at that age, what a lifeline that was for you.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. I think that's the thing, is I think about it, because sometimes I wonder how I survived.
Sure, of course.
I wonder how I didn't choose certain roads, or how did I make it? And I believe that I believe that we all have a destiny, and I'm sure we'll get to this part of my story, but I just believed that, we were given our lives for a reason. And I was given what I got because I'm supposed to do something with it. And that helped me later on in life, even look at my story or, my life and go, I wish I could have the healthy mom that I want and need, and the dad to come back, and the brother but it's like, if I learned kind of to blame effectively later in life, that if I had what I wanted, I wouldn't have become the woman that I became and the coach that I am. And so I decided to believe that I got what I got to help other people. And that brings light to my darkness. That gives purpose and meaning to my life. And that's always what I go back to, is because you're right. It's like whatever we focus on, we're going to get. And if I focus on all my disappointments, I suffer. And I have to constantly remind myself, because I still do it, of course, right? There's still disappointment and sadness greatly. And I just remind myself, Aly, you're choosing to suffer right now. And it's hard. It's hard. Like, it's, I tell other people, but then when it's yourself, and it's like, I am choosing to suffer. And so it's just choosing that thought that makes you feel good, even just like little by little, like you said, is just finding the good.
So you found sport, and here you are now, these formidable years. I mean, I think for a young woman especially, I really like to, as I said, we've had amazing, courageous, and vulnerable women like yourselves on. And I think for women, that adolescent time, you had a good group of friends. You had found sport. How did you maneuver those adolescent years? Had you moved out here now?
Yeah. So what happened is, once my father passed away, I was in, I believe, 7th grade, and so we had to move to either Florida or California, where my mom had 2 brothers, and one lived here and one lived in Florida, and someone had to look after my mom. And so we decided to come out here, and my brother came out before us because my mom couldn't take care of him anymore. And so we moved out here on Christmas Eve, 1996. Like I said, you don't forget that. And I was in 9th grade. And that was the thing, Charlie, is like we came out here and we were supposed to move out here before high school started. And I actually wanted to move because I just saw like a fresh start. Nobody will know who I am. Nobody will know that I have the quote unquote crazy mom, because that's what I called her at the time. And, I just, as much as I didn't want to leave my friends, I just wanted to move a fresh start where nobody knew me. And so we ended up not moving when we were supposed to because my mom was like so afraid to move. So I started high school and I was playing soccer. I played soccer since I'm 5 years old, and basketball. And in California, they're different. They're the same season. So I'd played soccer in 9th grade in New York, and then we inevitably had to move. So we moved during Christmas break of 9th grade.
Oh, wow.
And it was so mortifying for me because I, believe it or not, was so shy. I mean, I was shame and stigma and just afraid to speak. And I was just, it was so painful, so painful. I understand, what it's like to just feel like you just have that horrible feeling of having no one to sit with at lunch and no one to talk to and no friends. And you're just so afraid to be in your own skin. You just want to disappear. So I ended up starting to play basketball, but I had to choose. I didn't know. So that was that was another loss for me, was losing a sport. So, but yeah, sports is what has always been an outlet for me one way or another.
Well, you find, I think sport for a lot of people can be a solace because you have that sense of team. You have a coach, hopefully at least a coach who's more of a leader and can fill a certain role in your life. And you have some predictability. Practice starts at a certain time. Practice ends at a certain time. We practice for this long. We have games on these days. In this world that was yours of chaos, you could see how being drawn to something with a lot of predictability, that you already had an aptitude for and a bit of interest in, you'd gravitate to that. And I think, it's important for people to understand that there are healthy ways for us to cope with and create a life that we wanted. It's funny, I think, as you and I look back, we give names to things now as we're older, but we didn't know what it was then. And it was survival for you.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think it's important, that people understand that the most resilient person they ever need to meet is actually sitting in the chair they're in right now, because we are the most resilient. We just don't tend to look back at what we've been through and give ourselves credit. We want to look at what we're not instead of, I got through that. What was it about me? Oh, I sought out community and connection. I was a good friend. I worked through my shyness. I was an athlete, so I had some skill that I developed. And I'll use those things to get through the next event. But we often just dismiss our resilience as luck or anyone could have got through it. And it's just not true.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. So, but sports and athletics took on a different meaning for you after a while, huh? It was a little bit of a coping and a little bit of an escape, and then it took on a whole new meaning for you. Where did that kind of shift happen?
Yeah. So that's the thing, is like sports is such a healthy outlet for all those reasons you described, is that team camaraderie and being part of something. And like I said, I excelled at sports. I was a great athlete. And so for me, it made me feel normal. And that's the thing that I just realized, is that I'm getting attention, not for being part of a, the crazy family, but just this normal, like this great athlete. And of course that we love that feeling and feeling of acceptance. We want to feel like we belong. That's, such an important feeling. And so after high school, when, team sports ended, and because of my family situation, although I always say, like, what if my dad was alive, I probably would have played college sports, or, we can't do the what ifs. So I started running because I was going to college, but there was no team sport option for me. So kind of team sports were over at that point. So I started running, and I fell in love with running and started doing 5Ks and 10Ks and half marathons and triathlon. I mean, one thing, it just kept going. And again, so when you say it took me down a road, and sports is such a great coping skill and such a great outlet, until it's not, until you realize that there could be, negative consequences to it. And for me, it turned into overuse injuries that I'm just recently, after all these years, it's been a recent revelation for me to admit to myself. And now I'm just going to share this, because how else am I going to help other people? Is like, oh my gosh, it became an addiction for me.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, I think when we talk about addiction, or we talk about unhealthy engagement in something, people think about the, kind of the Vegas addictions, the Sin City, the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the gambling, but we can become addicted to shopping. We can become addictive to exercising when it detaches us from reality, when we're using it in unhealthy ways. I mean, I always tell people about my own battle with substance abuse. It's really not about what I drank, because I didn't drink the same thing everyone else drank. And it's not really about how much I drank. It was always about why I drank. And I was drinking to escape. I was really taken aback, and I don't think you and I share this alone. Many others do. That idea of, if I can go somewhere else, I'll be somewhere else. I grew up in Maine, and I'm in California. That was a lot of versions of myself I wanted to create. And I had that same image of every summer, wanting to unzip my skin and walk out and be faster, stronger. But I could just, if I went here, no one would know what happened to me. And, I think the cautionary tale there is, wherever you go, there you are, yes. Right? And so there is no escaping us until we get good with us. But you were trying to do that, and sport allowed that. And then I'm sure with exercising, as you said, everyone exercises. I'm just running. I'm not. You're not seeing. Were there any signs besides what you encountered now that you were using it in an unhealthy way to escape? I mean, did you lose contact with friends? Did you have any negative consequences associated with your addiction to sport as it grew?
So it's just so interesting, because I look back now, and I remember, even like, I'm thinking as you're talking to me, I remember when, like you said, you would come to my class and talk to my college freshmen and tell them your story. And I would teach this unit on addiction, and we would talk about how there are no healthy addictions, because I would ask them at the beginning of class, like, do you think there are any healthy addictions? And they would always say, exercise, studying, like they would make up stuff, drinking water, like. And the thing is, by definition, there can be no good addiction, because there's negative consequences. So if there's negative consequences, and even then I would read them this checklist of negative consequences, and I'm even thinking just right now as we're talking about this, I was, there's a denial phase, right? We're in denial.
Yes.
Even then I was in such denial, because here's the thing, is like, there's not a body part on me, I think, that I haven't had surgery on.
Wow.
Like, that is not something to be proud of, right? And it's taking me this long to realize that is a negative consequence.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Amazing.
Right? And so when you say, like, there's a story that I can tell you that was so, like, now to look back on it, I was doing the Santa Barbara triathlon. I think I was in my early 20s, maybe. It was when I first started doing triathlons, or a few years into it. And I had this fantasy. It's like I talk about, it's like, growing up, I wanted to be an Olympic athlete, because I just thought that will just make me, like, doesn't matter about this crazy family. If I'm an Olympic athlete with a medal around my neck, with the national anthem playing, like, there's nothing better to me than that. So I grew up with these fantasies of wanting to be this Olympic athlete. And so I was doing triathlons, and they were going to have triathlon be an Olympic sport for the first time. And I thought, I'm going to do this. Like, this is how, like, my brain worked, like, that I thought I could actually do this. And so I wanted to be like one of, in the first triathlon. So I was having problems with my hands and anyways, I wasn't supposed to do the race. I was told by the doctors to not do the triathlon. So I snuck out of the house at 4 a.m. with my bike, went to do the triathlon. It's a 34-mile bike ride, and this is so long ago that this is when the brakes were like not at the handlebar, or you had to and so I lost all grip strength in my hands, so I couldn't change my gears, and I'm using the my palm of my hand to change my gears, and then at the end I finished the race. At the end of the race, I couldn't even start my car. I couldn't even turn the key to start the car because I had no grip strength in my hands. I had to ask a stranger, this is going to sound really weird, but could you just start my car for me? And even like back then, looking back, I didn't think that there was really like, oh, I'm just injured. So I ended up having it was nerve entrapment in my elbows, kind of like carpal tunnel, but in my elbows. And so I had double elbow surgery. And I look back now and it's like, don't you think that that was kind of a sign that you just, so like my mind was just like, I'm going to do this no matter what.
Right.
Because this is how I feel good.
Right. And this is how I cope.
Yes.
This is how I feel normal. I mean,
Yes.
you said it all the way back to Long Island. I want to feel normal. I live in a crazy house. I live in an unpredictable house. I want to feel
Yes.
normal. And if that means I have to run with broken elbows and frozen hands to feel normal, I'll hurt myself. And
Yes.
but I mean, again, revisionist history, right? We look through these lenses and we go, wow, I mean, and that I think a lot of people will appreciate the vulnerability and appreciate, looking at the unhealthy attachment to things we're using to avoid or normalize life that are causing us actual pain.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. So transition us to the next chapter. I mean, because now we move into a period where, obviously you've got children and you get into a relationship and then you become a single mom. And so
Yes.
life takes on a new chapter for you.
Yes.
And what was that like?
So yes, I've been a single mom now it's going to be 11 years next month, which I mean, time passes and you just I look back and go, how did I do that? And you just do it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because I think that's probably something a lot of, especially the people that rely on you, deal with, is that feeling of being overwhelmed with the uncertainty of being a single parent and what that means and how am I going to do all of this, and I know that's become one of your passions. And so what are the lessons that you learned? I mean, as overwhelming as it seemed, you're now 11 years on the other side of it. What are the things that seemed so overwhelming, and what are the things that helped you kind of get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I remember at the time when I was even just kind of contemplating being in this situation, and I will never forget this. I had a friend who told me, you'll figure it out. You will figure it out. And it sounds like, yeah. So I talk about these 5 words that I talk about, of getting it's like a 5-word mantra that I just have taken with me, that sounds like it's not a big deal. Like, oh, you'll just figure it out. Right. But I really embraced it, and I never forgot that. And it's really so powerful because I do believe, and I talk about this too, is there's that book, Everything is Figure Outable by Maria Forleo. And I was saying that way before to my students. I used to tell my students, everything's figure outable. And so they thought that I made it up. And I'm like, I didn't make it up, but it's true. And it really is true, is one way or another. I mean, when you think about all the moments that we've gotten through in our life, we've gotten through them one way or another, and we will get through all the moments of our life. It's like that resilience you talk about. We were born with it, but we forget about it. And so it's just that, yeah, you will figure it out. And so back then, there's a moment that I remember, another one of my just aha moments or defining moments, is I remember sitting on the floor of the bathroom sobbing after, I had moved out with my children. My son was 2.5, not even 3, he's in diapers. My daughter's 6 years old. We had our dog at the time, and I'm on the floor sobbing, asking, how am I going to do this? And doing what many of us do, why me? Like, I was doing the why me? Like, why me, God? Like, could I at least have had a healthy mom or at least one family member? this was like a huge moment for me when I just decide something inside me said, you need to ask a better question, because the thing is whatever we ask, we're going to get an answer. So if we ask bad questions, we're going to get bad answers. So something inside me told me to, because I always believe that God gives us what we can handle. And then I thought, I was just so in that place, like, that's not good enough for me. I need more. I need to know. And so I chose to believe in that moment that God gave me what I can handle. That means that I have the strength to get through this, that I get to, it's like, I can't change any of this, but I get to decide what to do with it. And it just felt so empowering, scary. I still don't know how, but I just felt like I get to decide what to do with this. And I decided to ask, instead of why me, why not me? Like, who do I think I am to not get this life? And my mom, I want to tell you this story about my mom, because I want to just like honor her memory as much as possible. Is that, she was sick so much of my life, but she was so amazing. And so I have so much guilt about our relationship and what transpired, but when she was well, she gave me nuggets that I've kept with me forever. And we were like the poor family, obviously the crazy family, but she always told me to look at the people below me. I never forgot that. Like, and she meant by that is like, there's always someone, we have a roof over, just the basic things that we like tell our kids.
Yeah, but gratitude, a little bit of gratitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she always told me that. And it stayed with me. And I appreciated that even when I didn't, but that helps me to this day, that how blessed I am. And that there's that's the thing, is like, when we're not feeling good, if I focus on everything that I'm missing or lost in my life, I'm going to suffer and be sad. And we're here to feel good. And so it's just taking what can I feel good about right in this moment? Just being here, just, having 2 legs and 2 arms is just, I'm good. My kids are healthy. I'm good. Done.
So if you ask disempowering questions, you'll find disempowering answers.
Absolutely.
Amazing. And so you, in that moment, I think this is so valuable to note, you decided to ask a different question.
Yes. That's the thing. It's like,
amazing.
I was like, why not me, for the good things and the bad things in my life? And I still, to this day, because we're human, when we go back down, we're feeling depressed, anxious, whatever we're feeling, it's tools in the toolbox. It's tools in the toolbox that just are there, but we have to use them. And so I just say, why not me? And
kick the shit out of being a single mom. And what does that mean? It means I got up and made lunch. It means I got up and made dinner. It means I figured out where I could work and how to work. It means I figured it out. And 11 years later, you figured it out. And now you're helping other people figure it out, which I think is remarkable, because it can be overwhelming.
Yes. And when you say that, it's like, yeah, my kids have this saying about me, is like, always late, but worth the wait. And it's so much better 11 years later, but I probably shouldn't tell this story about how I got 3 speeding tickets in a week when I first was a single mom, just, rushing to get the kids to school on time. And yes, it was so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming.
But again, it's like, we can look at the speeding tickets, or we can look at getting the kids to school on time. And it's like, if you're out there and you're going to stay focused on the speeding tickets, you're going to find what you're not. But if you're focused on, I got my kids to school and I picked them up and I made their lunch, then you'll see that you are a good mom. And that's really, I think, what I take out of that sliver of your story is just what good there was in that journey and where you sit today. So tell us a little bit about your transition back to healthy exercise, because I know as part of your mission to help moms with their muscles and their mind, you've now come back to a very healthy relationship with exercise, and you know what healthy exercise looks like, and you know how to use that. And how did that come back to you as something you could use in your toolbox and not abuse, so to speak?
Yeah. So I think what it first started to be a switch for me and a shift for me is when I became a mom, is because I think everything changes when you become a mom. And it's just like, I wanted to be a role model. And so I realized that, and they become the priority. So while racing was still something I enjoyed and was important, I'm now a mom. That's the most important role to me. So that was my worthiness and my goodness. And so But it's funny, and you know this, that I just am coming off of these last two. I say last because I'm done. It's like these last. I had Achilles surgery almost 2 years ago, and then knee surgery. And I put that Achilles surgery off for 7 years, partly because it's such an extravaganza, and partly because I didn't want to face that. Am I still that person? And the thing is, it was a cumulative injury from having done all of that in the past, right? So all the sports, all the races. So now I have this injury that needs to be attended to. And I was like, I felt in my mind, if I have surgery, not only is it going to be an extravaganza, but then am I still that person? I can't be that person. So I just got over that. I was like, I have to inevitably, do this, and you're not that person anymore, and you do have balance, and so I think that first shift was becoming the mom, and then now it's just, you come to a place where what matters most to you, and what matters most to me is, if it feels good to exercise, but I know that I don't need to do it to stand out or be excellent or feel good or belong.
So maybe said a different way, you're not chasing an outcome anymore. You're in the moment. You exercise in the moment for the moment, not to be something. You're Aly B.
Yes, and you know what feels so good, Charlie, is like when I go out for runs now and I can finally run again and not.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, and it is for my mind more than anything, just because I truly enjoy just being outdoors, and the feeling that I get from running. Because I can't just give it up. I don't need to compete, but it's mental health for me. But it's so refreshing and such a great place to be when I don't need to just say I'm going out for like a run and I have to run the entire time. I run, I walk, like I just am out there. And it's just like, oh wow, this is freedom. This is freedom to just not have to have, like you said, an outcome. Like I'm just out here to feel good and get exercise, and it's so good for my mind. It's a drug of choice for me, but now it's in a healthy way.
Yeah, you found where it fits. I think you'll relate to this because it was framed differently by one of our guests recently. He said it's not the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit is happiness. It's the daily pursuit of life. We're not going anywhere. We're not looking to achieve anything. It's just the daily pursuit of whatever it is we want to do that day is where the happiness lives. It lives in the moments, and it sounds like what you experience now when you run is not a future outcome or the medal or the normal. It's just, I just run for my mind now. I run for my health and fitness and my well-being, and it's so you've changed your relationship with it.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I
so
think
awesome.
I think another part of it that was huge for me was when I had this realization that I don't think I was meant to be the athlete standing on the podium or achieving those goals. I was meant to help others be the best that they can be. So when I started, training people and coaching people and coaching runners and helping them achieve their goals, or just helping, like older people who don't even think they can run complete a 5K, like that's my greatest passion, is helping people see what's possible when they believe in themselves. So I realized that I think I was put here to help other people believe in themselves, and that I don't need to get the medals or the awards. It feels so good for me to help other people see what's possible.
So you've found to live by a principle of humility. You've taken yourself and become less important than the cause, and that's, I think, when we're kind of in that addictive mindset, we live by preference. What we want to do, and when we become mature and healthy, we live by principles, and that's what I see. And can I put you on the spot? Can you give us the Aly B ABCs of overcoming? Because I know you've got your top 3 things that people, because again, we suffer in silence from so much, and you've shown such a bright light on what overcoming can actually look like. So what are I usually ask people the top 3, but with you, I'm going to ask what are the ABCs of overcoming, that seemingly low, dark spot that so many of us can get into for you?
Yeah, I appreciate that, because that's the thing, is I learned how to use my brain, and my friends used to call me the beautiful mind, and they would say it's not a compliment, and I always took it as a compliment. And I don't really want to get into this part, but like I was kind of diagnosed, well, I was diagnosed with ADHD over 10 years ago, and it made sense to me at the time, and then it didn't. And I had a brain scan that showed it was PTSD, which made so much sense to me, but I do struggle. My brain is very special, I call it. And I learned that when I was teaching the college students and even everything, it's helpful for me to categorize it in ABC.
Yeah.
So it's
we're gonna do that, but I'm gonna pause because I if I showed you my my elementary school report cards, the teachers used up all the red ink in the state of Maine. When you have a trauma impacted mind, like you, I was actually put into special ed, and it wasn't that I was learning disabled, and it wasn't that I was ADHD. It was that I had a complex trauma impacted mind, meaning my life, like yours, was unpredictable.
Yes.
When bomb was go to that. So yeah, I mean, okay, you want me to learn my ABCs and my 1, 2, 3s, but I don't know if I'm going to get a meal tonight. I don't know if the ambulance is coming. So, I just take this moment to educate people on what a post-traumatic stress or a complex trauma brain of an adolescent is dealing with, and that we have to be very careful about throwing around diagnoses and medication and not understanding the underlying conditions for kids. Little sidetrack for some awareness around true mental health and childhood trauma.
Yes, I appreciate that, because I think in my case, we all have our own paths and journeys, and in a good way or bad way or whatever, there wasn't time for anybody to pay attention to me. I was the healthy person in the family.
Right.
And so, I
Filling
look back now.
filling a role you weren't qualified for.
Yes. And so there was no attention to what I was struggling with at the time with my own brain. So I just learned to adapt to it. And then, here I am now, and I still it's just that hypervigilance that I live with, that I'm, working on overcoming all the time, and social anxiety that people wouldn't even believe that I have. That is just everyday thing. I have social anxiety and hypervigilance, and for me to say it out loud is like, I really just said that out loud.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I'm here.
Of course.
Wow.
Yeah, we need to normalize these conversations. I still suffer. I wake up in the morning and I've got this overwhelming sense of anxiety that washes over me.
Yes.
By the time I pray and meditate, it dissipates.
Yes.
But it's we're progress, not perfection. Getting a little better every day. So hit us,
Okay.
Aly B,
Okay.
with the ABCs of overcoming.
So I think the A is a kind of a double A, is that first we just always in anything was having awareness. It's just awareness of our current truth of our, I guess it's a triple A, the actual truth of our life. So, and I tell people when I'm speaking and coaching, and it's like, there's no judgment allowed. Like, we have enough challenges. I want to just drop kick shame and judgment off our planet. Like, I feel like that is going to save so much in the world. If we can just drop kick shame and judgment off it's like, we are all doing the best that we can with what we know. And if we just stop and go, we are the way we are for a reason. We say and do the things we do for a reason. And so I think having awareness of the actual truth of your life without judgment of just what's working, what's not working, and how can I close the gap from where I am and where I want to go. And then it's having acceptance of the present moment. And I just was talking about this, and it's just acceptance in this moment that all is well and how it should be. And that, just acceptance of the situation is very powerful and peaceful. So it's just having awareness of the actual truth of your life without judgment and acceptance in the present moment. So that's the A. And then B is something I like to call bracing yourself. So I'm looking at your books that you have here, because you and I are both really into the sports performance and the mindset. So there's a book that I read called, now it's one of my favorite books. And now that I'm here, How Bad Do You Want It? It's by Matt Fitzgerald. He's a running coach. And this is where I learned about bracing yourself. So bracing yourself is just like bracing yourself for whatever is going to happen, right? So I think that especially now we're growing up with kids, and, we always want to protect them. But like you talk about resilience is like part of our jobs for ourselves and for our children is to let them figure things out. And knowing it's kind of, I'm going to go all over the place with this one, but when we would take our kids when they're little for their vaccines, when they're right. And I don't know, some will say like, don't worry, it's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt. Yes, it is. Right? It's going to hurt, but you're going to be okay. You are going to be fine. It's going to hurt and it will pass and you're going to be okay. And I just kind of use that as an analogy of just life. Like life hurts. It's not going to be perfect. Like there's going to be inevitable challenge, adversity. But we have everything inside of us to get through it. So when you can brace yourself for things in life, and so when I coach, it's like looking, and we do like teach people to do this like for monthly, like every month is like, what can you expect? What are you bracing yourself for in life right now? And know that, and like you talk about the coping skills, is like how can you prepare for it so that you can be prepared for it. It's just a very mature way to look at things instead of just expecting things are going to, because when you brace yourself, you can expect that there will be challenge, then you can accept it, going back to the acceptance, and then you can overcome it. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a whole, that's my B, is like brace yourself for the challenges of life because they are going to come. But know that you have everything inside of you. You've gotten through all the moments of your life until now, and you will get through all the moments. Because like when I was teaching those college students that you saw, Charlie, it was like the ones, again, is like the ones who had to struggle and had some adversity in life fared much better than the students who everything was easy for them. So it's like, yes, we want things to be easy for our children, or we don't, we want them to be strong. So when they have to overcome, it instills confidence in them that like, oh my gosh, I got through that. And it downloads that confidence for the next time, because as we see, life is uncertain. And so when we brace ourselves for those challenges, we can overcome them.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and it doesn't deny reality. It accepts the reality. It's like, I think when my son was growing up, we went through about a night terrors, and we were instructed very clearly to not tell him there's nothing to be afraid of, but say, do you want to walk around the house? Do you want to look in the closet? Because you don't want to deny his feelings and somehow, have him feel that what he's feeling isn't real. You're feeling afraid, but what is it based on? You think there's someone in the closet? Let's check out the closet. Hey, you want to get under the bed? Let's look under the bed. You want to go down and lock the doors? Well, what can we do to help you feel safe, as opposed to don't feel afraid? Because we tend to have this desire to push down and avoid, but negative feelings tell us something. They're a bit of a signal light. And the C.
Okay, the C. The C is choices. Okay, so the C is that's the thing, is like choices about our C again doubles, like choices about the circumstances of our life. And there's an actual equation for this. Is like, I did not make this up. Like there's an equation for suffering. There's an actual. It's somebody named Shinzen. It's called Shinzen's equation, and it says that the circumstances of our life times resistance equals suffering. Meaning that if we resist the circumstances of our life, we are going to suffer. And so it's about making choices, and we make choices. Every single one of us makes choices every single day that impact the quality of our life. And I talked about it a little bit when you were asking me questions before. And so we choose to focus on what we have or what we don't have. We choose to focus on the past, the present, or the future. We choose to focus on what's missing in our life, right? And so if we choose to focus on what we can't control and what we don't have, we're going to suffer. But if we choose to suffer on what we do have in our life and what we can control and stay centered in that present moment, we're going to feel better. So that's what is so important, is deciding to have that way of thinking, right? That's just, we decide, because that's the thing, is we do choose to suffer. And again, I talked about this, and for me, I have to remind myself too, like anybody else, Aly, you're choosing to suffer, right? Oh yeah. And luckily I have that tool that's like, and that's the thing, is using the tools. Like when we know them, is like when I'm coaching, is like, I can give you the tools, you have to use them. And it's just like when we train our muscles and we have to keep doing repetitions, it's the same thing with the mindset tools. We have to keep repetition, and just till it becomes who we are. So now I catch myself very quickly when I'm suffering.
Yes.
And I'm like, Aly, you're suffering. You are choosing to focus on what's missing, what you're disappointed about, what you can't control. And then it's just a switch goes off, and I just grab the thought that makes me feel good, that I can control this. I look at all that I do have this, and I stay centered in that present moment. and it feels better. And we are here to feel good. That's why we're here.
Yeah, so true. The ABCs of overcoming. And I think the other incredible nugget today was to ask yourself the right question, when you're looking for the right answer. I've been inspired by your resurgence, by your return to coaching and being, launching your framework and seeing all the things you're doing. And we'll obviously note all of that in the podcast and in the show notes. But can you just maybe tell everybody where they can find you? I know they're going to want to click as soon as they get off of this and hear more of your wonderful ABCs of life as you're teaching us every day, which I appreciate. How can people find you, Aly B?
Aly B Coaching, very simple. And I do so my name is Aly, so it's ALYB Coaching. And ALY stands for always love yourself. And that's the thing that was like a work in progress for me. And it's so important that we have that self-love and self-care. And so that's why I'm here to remind people to always love yourself.
Well, the world needs you immensely now. It's a privilege to have you as part of a little bit of my inner circle and to have been empowered by you as I was starting to speak openly about my struggles. And to have you here today has been amazing. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I feel so grateful to be here and have this opportunity.